What's up guys, my name is JDCook5 and welcome back to another episode of the F1 My Team series, and this is the end of the season, so it's the last race of this particular season as we look forward to season 2. Obviously the last race is always at the famous track at the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi as we look to make the final upgrades that we possibly can, and the resources that we have left and everything, we might as well use them because obviously they won't really matter for next season in terms of carrying it over, so you might as well get a few upgrades while we can for the newer car next season as we look to upgrade a few things, just to see what we've got left and what we can upgrade more than anything. Obviously there's going to be much more room for improvement in terms of going forward next season. Obviously we've only kind of gone X amount of steps on particular upgrades. There's a gearbox change that needs to be made also, I feel like a 56% wear on the actual gearbox, and I feel like that will make an issue, so we will get a 5-place grid penalty on the next race that we're going to be competing in, and not too much of a big deal, but this is a big deal because we need to have a teammate for next season. Felipe Massa isn't happy taking a lower wage, which I wasn't too fussed about having for next season, honestly, to lower the cost, but we're going to have to be looking at someone, and that someone is Esteban Ocon. We have been looking at a few drivers. I looked at Albon, he said no. I looked at Gasly, he said no, and I looked at Fernando Alonso, he said no. The specs, everything else, it just wasn't kind of catching out for him whatsoever, and unfortunately we have to kind of settle for a lesser kind of rating in terms of a driver. We are going to be going for the experienced Esteban Ocon. I feel like he can bring a little bit more compared to what Felipe Massa has in previous races. We're going to have to do an auction for the bidding and see what we can kind of do, and see if we can outbid Alpine. Alpine wants to renew his contract. Whether we can entice him to see what we will do is another thing. As you can see, we're making bids left, right and centre as we've got a 5.25 million bid has been accepted, and we have won the auction for Esteban Ocon, and he will be driving for us for the last race and this season as we look to see the changes. Kevin Magnussen's going to be on the AlphaTauri. There's been a retirement for Nico Hulkenberg, as you know, and that will be the case of AlphaTauri with Nick De Vries. He will stay the same. Yuki Tsunoda changes over to Alfa Romeo, so complete changes in the AlphaTauri, as you can see. Williams is still the same. Alpine, Valtteri Bottas has moved over to Alfa Romeo. Obviously Yuki Tsunoda's made that bit of a change. Valtteri Bottas will take Ocon's seat from this last race and next season. Not too many other changes in all honesty to really report about. Red Bull stays the same, Mercedes stay the same, Ferrari stay the same, Aston Martin the same, so only between the Alpines, the Alfa Romeos and the AlphaTauri that we have the difference in terms of drivers. The Haas also actually being said, Marino Sato will come in as also, I'm pretty sure it's Felipe Drogovic that will also be his teammate, as we are then doing practice on this circuit, and it's a decent circuit. It's one of my favourites. There's a lot of speed, there's a lot of straights, there's a lot of DRS kind of moments also, so I feel like it's a kind of car that benefits the track really, really well. Obviously you feel like different cars kind of benefit different tracks, and it's one of those where if you can kind of get the setup really kind of fine-tuned to make yourself go fast. Whether that is the case, who is to be said, as we look to go on further in this practice session. So we did fairly well, in all honesty. I felt like we get some decent lap times, we created a lot of programs, got to a lot of R&D, which is always important in the practice sessions. It allows you to acclimatise to the track and everything else in your surroundings, and you kind of get a feel from what you will going to be doing in the next sort of race, and it will be interesting to see where we will be at, in all honesty, because I feel fast, I feel good, the setup works really well, and I feel like I can push the car at the right times, and I feel like we can be kind of competitive in the last race and give the fans a show for the last time this season, and it will be an interesting one, those for sure. There's going to be no changes in positions in terms of final standings, constructors, nothing like that, nothing to fight for apart from pride then, as we look to push on in this practice session. We do finish P1 and half a second better. Esteban Ocon finishing 12th in the first practice session for JD Cook Motorsport. A really interesting one to see where he finishes, and yeah, it will just be interesting to see what happens, in all honesty, whether we can push on and see what we can do in qualifying. We are going to have to require a different angle in the race due to the problems that EA are facing with the camera issues of a night time in the race only, not qualifying, not practice, just the race. As you can see, lap 2 of Q1, a really interesting affair, as we do originally qualify P5 from a lap 1, but we'll try and better ourselves in the second lap then. We really tried to find our feet. Even though we didn't have the overtake, we knew where we went wrong in the previous lap, and we can kind of capitalise on that and push even further forward. And that's the case of being able to kind of remember where we were poor and just improve in slight areas. And that's where it always is. It can only be one corner that determines your lap time, and in all honesty, it can be where you can make up 300 to 400 of a second in this F1 game. As everyone will know, that kind of slight mistake it can be really, really costly at the same time. And it is all about those fine margins more than anything, and it needs to be looked at, and it needs to be an important thing in your sort of racing game, and that is definitely something that we are taking into account as we look to be doing a much better lap 2, half a second much better, 600 of a second. So we're definitely improving as the time goes forward. As you can see, we're nearly up to 700 of a second there as we do complete the final few corners then of this particular lap. Whether that will be the last lap of qualifying, who is to say? I think it might be a better one than the first lap, so we will stick with it. We're currently P6 as Alonso and Ocon are just behind us. Not everyone has completed their laps, that is to be said, but we look to go and see what we can do as we cross the line. Pole position then at 123.6, but bearing in mind that grid penalty was in fact obviously going to be playing a part, so we will start 6th in tomorrow's race. A really interesting one to see what will happen then. An unfortunate one, we do get a pole position for the first time that we have done this season. Don't get me wrong, that is really cool, but we won't even be able to start P1 purely because of that grid penalty with the gearbox change. Esteban Ocon finishing in 17th on the grid for qualifying, so that'll be a tricky race for him, that is for sure.
This year's Formula One World Championship. 2010 saw 4 drivers in contention for the title coming into this race, with Sebastian Vettel prevailing to become the youngest world champion to date. Is there one last sting in the tail awaiting us today? Well, it's time to find out here at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The drivers will be racing here at the Yas Marina circuit through 16 corners and a lap distance of around 3.28 miles. There are a few opportunities to pass with long straights and DRS zones in 2 places, so plenty of close racing, then plenty of speed and plenty of drama to be found in the laps ahead. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. George Russell will begin today's event in pole position, edging out Lando Norris, who'll start from P2. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Leclerc, Verstappen, Cook, Sainz, Fernando Alonso, Hamilton, Gasly, Bottas, Oscar Piastri, Stroll, Drugovich, Tsunoda, Sato, Ocon, Joe, Albon, Magnussen, Sargent, and Nick de Vries. And now it's time to head down to the track. And I'm joined once again by Anthony Davidson to bring you the lowdown for today's race. They've been involved in a number of costly incidents lately. That's got to affect their mindset going into this race.
Certainly confidence is an important factor. And every time you're involved in an incident, it's not just the car you damage, but that confidence as well. But all the top racing drivers are able to tune that out when the race gets underway and focus on the job at hand.
Here we are then, we're on the grid for the last time this season. We're waiting for the 5 lights out, the rev limiter up to the max, and it's going to be lights out and away we go then, starting 6th, but we're already up to 5th. And we're already up to 4th as we pass the world champion Max Verstappen and the man from Monaco, Charles Leclerc, as we battle out with Sergio Perez through that corner. We slot ourselves into P4, 2 places being made up from the start, and this is going to be a good Grand Prix, that is for sure, as we've got the ERS being drained straight away as we try and make a move on Sergio Perez as we look to go up on the inside, but it's not to be as they go really tight to the corner. Loss of her heavy braking being used also as we slot in just behind him. George Russell just in front with, I do believe that is Lando Norris leading the race for the first time this season in matter of fact. The McLaren at the top at the moment as Sergio Perez looks to go and take a look on George Russell in the Mercedes. He's on the harder tyre, but also taking a look is Charles Leclerc as we try and see if we can maintain our position. You see Perez has literally just gone slightly out of the way for me, which was quite nice in all honesty, as we maintain the speed and we get through to P3. Yellow flags being waved momentarily. What that is for, I'm not too sure, as nothing has been noted so far as Lando Norris gets overtaken. He slots into P2. George Russell up into P1 then as he leads the race in Abu Dhabi as we look to see if we can try and take a look at Lando Norris. We're going to lay onto the brakes and on the right hand side, on the inside, and we are through on Lando Norris and up into P2. A lot of places being made up already as we look to try and see if we can make a move on George Russell before the checkered line, making the first lap then, and we're going to get a chance on this corner, but I'm not too sure if that's going to be the case. Round the outside we go as we look to go and see if we can have some slipstream on George Russell. Onto the right hand side we go. Much better exit compared to George on that corner as we look to try and go deep into the right hand side as we then see if we can make a tight left, and that was a really good overtake on George Russell, and through we are into P1, lap 2 of 20, and we've already got ourselves up into P1. We're definitely one of the faster cars on track as we get a purple sector 1. Don't forget that we did finish pole position momentarily, but obviously the grid penalty does take effect, so don't forget how fast we actually are on this track then as we look to see what our teammate is going to be doing on the track. I'm not too sure if he's going to be doing anything special this time round. Who is to say? Maybe he can make a mark for himself. He's currently in 17th place, so no real jump for Esteban, but we have to be patient. We have to improve the car, and hopefully he improves with it, as we've got George Russell just behind us and Lando Norris in 3rd, Sergio Perez in 4th, and the world champion Max Verstappen in 5th. Resume racing once again. Something may have happened then, and that might make a change to the race as it's changing just behind me also. Yellow flags being waved everywhere momentarily on the same part from what lap 1 was also. Nothing happened is what we can see just as of yet, so we continue to see what will happen. Lap 2 of 20 nearly coming to an end then as George Russell is still behind us. Half a second splits us at the moment. A decent gap between ourselves and the McLaren, so it's pretty much us and the Mercedes at the moment battling it out to see who can get P1 on the last day as we look to try and complete the final few corners. And the final corner this is for lap 2 as we look to go over the checkered line, completing lap 2 of 20. Now pushing on to lap 3 then. Fastest lap once again, a 127.5, DRS enabled also, so if they are within a second they are going to be looking on the overtake as George Russell minimises the time just behind us. As you can see, he's moving on to the left hand side, he's got the slipstream, he's got the DRS, and George Russell goes through, tries to go light onto the brakes and change out, resume racing once again. I'm not too sure if that's a glitch or if something is actually happening behind us as George Russell puts himself right in front of us, trying to see if we can take a look out on the in or the outside. We have got DRS also going behind him as we try and push on further. He has got the harder compound of the tyre, so it is going to affect Kevin Magnussen out the session, so it was actually something. As you can see, he was behind our teammate Esteban Ocon, but unfortunately for himself, the first outing in the AlphaTauri machine, and it all goes up in smoke as Kevin Magnussen, and that is an end to his race as we battle further with George Russell. Lap 5 of 20 then, wheel to wheel going through that corner. He gets the better of us momentarily as he might have a bit more grip on that harder set of compound tyre as we go through these final few corners, and George Russell was really holding his own as he glides through there, and he looks really good on that harder compound. He looks very fast for what the actual tyre is also, bearing in mind that's not the fastest of tyres that you could possibly be on. The track temperatures do make a difference to that also, don't get me wrong, but we're going to try and get an exit out of the last corner to complete lap 5 of 20, then going on to lap 6. No fastest laps being completed, way off the laps actually, in all fairness. Sergio Perez currently got the fastest lap, I'm not too sure what that is at the moment, but we still are behind George Russell, and he looks to be maintaining a decent bit of speed going through the straights also, so might be hard to overtake him. We still are going to get DRS as we go through those corners really nicely. Whether that's going to make a difference in terms of overtaking, who is to be known. Is it C? You can see the ERS is kind of draining a lot as well, so we're not really fighting in that way, but it's going to be really hard to be able to try and get past George, that is for sure, as he holds his own through that corner and he defends really well. We kind of go on the outside as you see, and we nearly go sidewall into George Russell. He maintains that corner speed as we go late onto the brakes, and through we go up into P1. We are past George as we maintain and we kind of battle with the car, and through we are then on MP1 on George Russell, and we're going to be come to the end of lap 9 of 10:20, and it's going to be in P1. The pit is going to be made though. George Russell will battle along as we literally try and hold ourselves within the actual pit bit itself. George Russell goes on then, as so do many others. Sergio Perez going on, Charles Leclerc is pitted, Max Verstappen is pitted. Don't get me wrong, this is going to be really hard for everyone. This is going to be time to tell whether we can make any sort of difference, that is for sure. And now we are down and out the pits, an optimal pit stop, a really good pit stop at that, and see what difference we can make now. Not too sure where we're going to rejoin the race as Nick De Vries is right behind us. As you can see, the gap is definitely closed as you look at the mini-map and see where we are going to be behind. I think Charles Leclerc is just going to get in front of the pack. Yes, he is. He'll slot himself into P11, and with myself in P10 with my teammate Esteban Ocon just in front with 3 seconds to spare. He's yet to pit, so obviously we will overtake a numerous amount of people. Felipe Drugovich currently in 8th. Obviously that will change also as we look to try and warm up the medium tyre and see what difference it will make to our race, if it will make it any faster, that is to be said. As you see, numerous people going in the pits, one of them being my teammates. What type of positions will make up who is to say. So everyone's pitted, and as you can see on the mini-map, if you can make it out, Sergio Perez is just in front of George Russell, so for whatever happened on that lap from when I pitted on lap 10 it would have been, I'm pretty sure, then that is really interesting to know actually. So Perez is just in front. Charles Leclerc slots into P2, so he's done even better. And George Russell, the man that was battling it out at P1 for a fair few laps, is actually slotted himself into P4. Big changes made in this Abu Dhabi Grand Prix then, lap 11 of 20. A decent gap behind me, 1.8 seconds splits myself and Sergio Perez. Can we end the season on a high? Who knows then, as we complete the first lap, the proper lap on the medium tyre. And we have got a fastest one, 126.181 that is, trying to make out there. Max Verstappen getting he's in a 125.9. So is Lewis Hamilton, so everyone's looking faster on that medium tyre. Whether that will make a bigger competition, who knows, sorry. And that is going to be really interesting as the gap does extend. As you can see, about 2 seconds currently. Sergio Perez in second then. He's actually overtaken Charles Leclerc as they're going to be battling it out. George Russell in fourth then, with Carlos Sainz on the harder tyre in the second part of the race. He's in fifth then, but Sergio Perez, George Russell and Charles Leclerc in a massive battle, and as you can see they've crept up on me. Lap 15 of 20, and then we've got 5 laps left of this Grand Prix, and we're in a familiar setting with George Russell just behind us, and he's made up a decent amount of time at the same time, and this is going to be really interesting to see if he's going to take a look at us, and he's pretty much sniffing my rear wheels as he looks to try and see if he can make an overtake. Whether he can is another thing, as he goes on the outside, probably the wrong side, but he tries to take a look, and he's definitely going to give it a go as we try to get the better exit of George Russell, but George Russell has done that corner absolutely to perfection. We're going to get DRS. Oh, no one's got DRS, and me or Russell, neither of us have got DRS for whatever reason. Maybe that's a glitch in the game, but we have to slot ourselves between ourselves and George. Sergio Perez taking a look to try and see if he can get into P2. We do go late onto the brakes, and we've actually got ourselves into P1. No, it is literally neck and neck, and as you can see, if I look behind me, I can't even see George Russell, and there he is, as he was wheel to wheel, and he does have to back out of that one. A really good battle put up by the Brit as he looks to try and see if he can make an overtake into P1, and he's definitely going to take a look at any point in time he possibly can. He's probably in the faster engine, that is for sure, as we complete these laps, and the laps are really going quick, and as the laps go on, the time it kind of gets slower, in all honesty, because I feel like I'm literally battling it out with George Russell and Sergio Perez on every point in time. I want the laps to end as quick as possible as we are battling it out. George Russell takes another look as he goes on the outside. I've got the inside line. That's no kind of benefit to me whatsoever, and he does have to back out of that one once again. That outside line proving really dangerous as he tries to take a look at me and go into P1 as we complete the final few corners of this lap. 16 of 20 then being completed. George Russell in second, Sergio Perez in third. Carlos Sainz has jumped up to fourth, with Charles Leclerc originally being in second from when the people came out the pit. He's actually in P5 now, so the medium tyre is not really working well for him, and he's not seeming to be as competitive in this race as we go on to lap 17 of 20 then. George Russell just behind us, and Sergio Perez are going to be the ones to be able to take a look. To be honest, the gap between the top 5 is only 1.6 seconds, so that's a big difference to see what will exactly happen then as we look to go to the end of lap 17. Not a lot happening until now as we get onto the straights and the DRS. George Russell is literally neck on neck, and he's going to take a look, and he's going to go through. Sergio Perez also charging up, with Carlos Sainz also charging up. Pretty much a four-way battle as we look to try and see if we can do anything. Sergio Perez overtaking me also as we look really deceitful, and that is not good whatsoever as Sergio Perez does take a look. He does overtake me momentarily. We slot ourselves back into P2, but George Russell has definitely taken advantage of the battle behind him, and he has gone even further in front, 800 per second at the moment, as George tries to power on. The medium tyre working really well from him, a different strategy where he was originally on the harder tyre, but the medium tyre seeming much better for him as he does look faster, that is for sure. He's also got the fastest lap, let's not forget that, as he pushes on in this lap then. Lap 17 of 20 nearly coming to an end as we battle it out with George. We're right behind him, so the battle is definitely going to be on the straights when we get DRS. As long as we get a good exit, it is kind of time will tell when it comes on the straight, as we look to go really fast through that corner, much better than George, as we switch to the right hand side, and we're going to get the power on. ERS activated also. Lap 18 of 20, and an overtake has been made as we go late onto the brakes. He tries to get the inside line. We get pushed out wide on the outside, but we have maintained the place. P1 momentarily then as George Russell's just behind us. Sergio Perez is just behind George. with Sainz in 4th and Charles Leclerc still in 5th, only 1.5 seconds splits the top 5 still. It is a real tight gap as of the moment, and Sergio Perez is getting overtaken by Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz into 3rd, a big change being made up in this top 5. It's chopping and changing like anything, and as you can see, Verstappen's now in the fold for whatever reason. George Russell's dropped down to P5. Carlos Sainz has made the harder tyre work completely out of nowhere more than anything. Verstappen in 3rd, Perez in 4th, and George Russell in 5th then, as we're on lap 19 of 20. Coming to an end then, as we're going to be on the final lap, and this is definitely going to be to the final lap and for the final kind of checkered flag, that is for sure. Here we are then, lap 20 of 20. Carlos Sainz is going to be one that's going to be troubling, because it's only about half a second as of the moment. It might look okay, but I bet the DRS and kind of makes the gap even shrink even further then, as Carlos Sainz is just behind us. Max Verstappen might take a look at us. Perez or Leclerc, I think Leclerc's too far away in all honesty, 3 seconds, so it might be his teammate Carlos Sainz was 400 per second, 300 per second, so he's definitely looking faster. He's got the DRS, he might have some overtake left in him also. He is whizzed past us, he slots himself into P1. We're trying to overtake him on that corner, going late onto the brakes as possible, but it's not to be, and unfortunately we have to maintain P2. Sergio Perez is going to be taking a look at us also, as Max Verstappen takes a look and he gets past. We have to go into P3 then, and bad to worse, because Sergio Perez is going to take a look at us also. This is going to be really interesting as I go right into the rear of Max Verstappen. Can we at least solidify P2 then, as Carlos Sainz looks to be winning the last race of the season? A nice overtake past Max Verstappen, and through we go on the Dutchman. He might be the world champion, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be the one that can't be overtaked, as Carlos Sainz is just in front. I think there's too less of a corners being left, and if it was just a bit more of the race, we might just have got past Carlos. A bad exit out of that corner, and he seems to get the better of us, and Carlos finishes 1st and we finish 2nd. A good race nevertheless. We started P6, we made our way all up into P1. We was leading the race for quite a while, but we have to settle for P2. Carlos Sainz having a very, very good strategy, and that is very good from himself. Driver of the day goes to myself. A very, very good race, and a very, very good end to the season. At least we have a trophy to show for it as we collect them there, as Carlos Sainz was definitely a decent strategy from the Spaniard, and he rode a really, really good race. Fair play to the man in the Ferrari engine, and he looks to push on, and that might be something to say for next season. You just never ever know, as we spray the champagne for the final time this season then, as we look on to bigger and better things, hoping that next season brings us more results, bigger results, and hopefully we might be lifting some sort of trophy at the end of it. But you just never ever know what car we can kind of produce, and we might be able to kind of upgrade our engine also. That would be good. Confirmation of the final standings then. We finish on P2. Our teammate Esteban Ocon absolutely nowhere near us. He's nowhere to be seen, so not the best of first races for Esteban. It's one of those where you're not going to expect much from your teammate initially, but it just has to be said, we need a decent teammate to be able to compete in the constructors. But I also have to give him a decent car. As you knew in previous races, I think Esteban Ocon has actually been battling for a podium, so he's definitely a good racer and a good driver. I was after different drivers, don't get me wrong, but we're not going to kind of dwell on that, and we're going to do the best we can with what we've got. As the confirmation of the final standings, we start ourselves into P6, only just as we go above Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. 4th in the constructors also, so a real good improvement made in the first season, as we look to try and better that in the second, and hopefully we can push on even further. Final few activities being completed then before the end of the season, before we complete it and look to improve our car and everything else. We might as well spend the final funds we've got, because it's going to be going to nothing in terms of the wages, and we will get a completely new budget at the start of the season to be able to upgrade all these different things and hopefully better the car and the facilities that we have. Looking at the actual races that we did compete, and obviously that kind of historical win in Hungary that we're going to be looking at. The first podium was in Canada. We got a P3, P5 in Great Britain. Our home race is say P1 in Hungary. That was the monumental one. Sorry, not many podiums. More to the end though, we actually did get the podiums. As you can see, a P3 in Qatar, P2 in the USA, and we got a P3 in Vegas, P2 in Abu Dhabi. So the only one win, but that was a massive win, that is for sure. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Please like and subscribe for more content just like this one, and don't forget to hit the notification button so you never miss a video. Cheers.